twin. I've heard from RM, obviously, that you are an intellectual army. And like any good intellectual army, you need some good book recommendations stat. And as a fellow army and your queer nerdy brown bestie, I am here to deliver, because today we're going to be taking a trip down memory lane and matching each iconic BTS era to their bookish twin. Also, as a fun and random twist, I'm going to be adding an accessory to my outfit that represents each era, so stay till the end of the video to see the full fit, because genuinely, I have not planned it to be aesthetic at all. I've not planned it at all. And a final point before we jump in, I will not be looking at anthology albums or solo work. This comeback is OT7. I want to focus on when all 7 of them were together. And so we are starting with the Skool trilogy era, including Too Cool for Skool, Oh Are You Late Too, and Skool Love Affair, the iconic inception of BTS.
Everybody say no.
And there were so many bangers from this era, but I feel like the one thing we can all agree on that this era represented really well was the struggles of being a young person at that time, but still now, as we know, because many of us are still relating to these problems 10 years later. Oh my god, it's been more than 10 years, however many years later. And I think because you have songs like No in there, which are obviously about students being like machines in the wider Korean system, and then you also have songs like Coffee, Just One Day, and then No More Dream, which is about having dreams as a young person, etc. I think the core theme of this era is the contrast between like the raw, gritty energy that comes from being a really ambitious young person, or maybe not an ambitious young person, as we know from No More Dream, with the intensity of being a young person on the other spectrum, which is like when you have your first love and you want to spend all your time with them, or drinking your first cup of coffee, I don't know. And therefore, the bookish twin for this era is Stars and Smoke by Marie Lu. This book is YA, and the plot is a massive pop star called Winter Young is basically assigned to be on a spy mission alongside Sydney Cosette, who is one of the youngest and the best spies at this elite spy group. I don't know what you call the right word for it is. And basically, a major crime boss has gifted his daughter a private concert by Winter Young for her birthday. And so Sydney and Winter are going to use this as their opportunity to infiltrate this major crime group, with Sydney acting as Winter's bodyguard. And on the surface, when you hear the plot, right, you might be thinking, oh, Priyanka, this just sounds like some silly little YA, potentially enemies to lovers novel with a dope plot, but let me explain why this is the 100% bookish twin for the Skool trilogy era. Firstly, it completely matches the romance vibe. It has the perfect blend of dark undertones related to ambition and the price you have to pay for ambition, and particularly what ambition looks like when you're trying to hustle as a pop star, okay? Like the first chapter, as far as I recall from reading it a couple years ago, literally opens with Winter talking about his backstory and how someone related to him died like along his journey. But it then also perfectly blends that with the exact right amount of romance and humor and tongue-in-cheekness that all 3 of these albums have. It truly is chef's kiss. And for the accessory, I will be adding this chain to my outfit, because I think we can all agree the fashion in this era was... Yeah, I don't think I need to say anything else. That's so cold. Moving on, we have the next era, which is the Dark and Wild era. Now, I have heard a lot of other armies describe this album as representing a transition into adulthood. So whereas the Skool trilogy era was all about like youth and being a young person, Dark and Wild is sort of the next step of that, where it's all about taking a step back and being like, oh, I have all these feelings and I need to try and process them like an adult. How do I do that? Whereas the Skool trilogy era might have been a lot more about like raw youth and passion and ambition. The Dark and Wild era is more about like taking a step back. And I feel like from the tone of a lot of songs, like Danger, interestingly, there is sort of like an undercurrent of reflecting and like some kind of inner reflection work and being like, oh, why do I have these feelings right now? What's going on? But as we know, because it's yearning and piney, it's also a little bit horny. Like, war of hormone. Need I say anything else? And therefore, the bookish twin for this era is How to Bite Your Neighbor and Win a Wager by D.N. Bryan. Or Byron. I don't know how to pronounce that last name. Soz. And I'm reading it right now, and guys, oh, it is so good. It's a paranormal MLM romance between Vincent, who, oh, is just the sweetest guy ever, and he is an unhoused poor vampire, and Wesley, who is basically chaotic bisexual mess, and he's plotting to capture a vampire because a big pharmaceutical company called Vitalis Baron might have been responsible for the death of his mum, and Vitalis Baron do experiments on vampires, and he's like, if I can get into the company, then I can find out what actually happened to my mum. And firstly, not only does the cover perfectly match aesthetically Dark and Wild's album cover, but I genuinely think the album would make such a good soundtrack while you are reading this book, as I have actually been doing, because it matches the exact same like yearning and pining vibes. Like, so much of this book is obviously about the tension between Vincent and Wesley, but the type of angst and the type of horniness that is in this book is perfectly represented. It's like respectful distance, but also really wanting to like push through. And like I said, so much of in this book is actually also about that transition to adulthood and figuring out like, how do I take responsibility of my life? It's something we're all trying to figure out, am I right? And for this era, the accessory I'm gonna add is this backwards hat in honor of Jimin. Fun fact, this is actually a Nana hat that I got at Comic-Con, and this might be the first time I'm wearing it properly, so you get to be part of this, whatever this is. Oh my goodness, guys. You are not prepared for the next era. You know what's coming. It is the youth trilogy era, which, as we all know, is the start of the Bangtan universe. So I'm encapsulating this era as the most beautiful moment in life part 1 and 2, and the most beautiful moment in life Young Forever. Interestingly, I think part 1 and part 2 have different vibes to Young Forever. Part 1 and part 2, in a very BTS fashion, it's never just one thing, is it? Because you have songs like I Need You and Converse High, which are basically like love poems and so romantic and sweet and yearning and pining. But then you also have songs like Dope and Silver Spoon, where you're like, whoa, hold up, you're trying to tell me something about society here, aren't you? Trying to socialize me. No, trying to radicalize me. Clearly I'm not socialized. And so part 1 and 2, to me, obviously the social commentary is a core part of it, but then you also have this idea of like fun and celebrating your youth, but also working hard. And also love, romance, but very interestingly, a more mature kind of romance compared to the other albums. Like, it's less like, ooh, you're tempting me, you're dangerous, and it's more like, your presence is the only thing keeping me alive and stable right now, and you can never leave. Actually, on reflection, I don't know how mature that is, but it's the working through it, right? And also the fantasy of the Bangtan universe mixed in there, you cannot forget about it. There could literally be no better bookish twin for this era than One Last Stop by Casey McQuiston, because it perfectly encapsulates every single part of this era. The book is set in New York. New York is a core part of this novel. Firstly, check, we got the my city in there, alright? And basically we follow August, who is 23. She's just moved to New York. She's obviously like, I need housemates, I need rent, I need to live my life, because she's at college, and she moves in with this group of eccentric queer people, essentially. And on the subway, she spots this same girl every single day called Jane. Jane is like hot, butch, Chinese immigrant lesbian. That's relevant, I'm not being racist. And basically, there's a paranormal twist as to why they have a connection in the first place, and why August keeps spotting her tick on the Bangtan universe. And I think it's Jin's story, right? Where Jin is the one who is like a ghost, and he's not actually there. And also, I think the words "I need you" are said in the novel multiple times between all of the love interests. So that same kind of like yearning love when you're like not quite a teenager but you're also not quite an adult is captured perfectly. And then also with stuff like Dough, the hustle culture in that song perfectly mirrors the hustle culture in New York that is in this book. Like almost all her roommates are like blue collar workers and doing shift to shift jobs. Literally could not be a better twin. Fight me in the comments. I feel very strongly about this one, especially because One Last Stop is one of my favorite books of all time. I will never stop recommending it. Young Forever, on the other hand, because I feel like it doesn't have Converse High or Boys with Fun, and also has Young Forever and Save Me, is very much more on like the tragic and poetic end of the spectrum of the Bangtan universe story. And so its bookish twin is The Stars and the Blackness Between Them by Janalda Petrus, another one of my all-time favorite books. And now that I think about it, it's also another sapphic recommendation. But basically, we follow two black girls from very different walks of life who eventually come together. One is called Audrey, and she's 16, and she's originally from Trinidad, and because her pastor catches her with another girl, she's being sent to live with her dad in America. And Mabel is like your average girl living in Minneapolis, except she's just broken up with her ex, and she falls hard very quickly. But she has a terminal illness, which again, as we know, plays into all of the intensity and the traumatic stories of the Bangtan universe. Oh my god, I looked up this Reddit post and just saw all of the problems with all of the members listed in a row, and I was like, wow, they really went all in. And it's really interesting because it's about how they come together and they reflect on their identities, but also the way the book is structured is you have alternating POVs and you also have poems relating to each zodiac sign in between chapters, and those poems are so beautiful, and the way they're written actually remind me a lot of songs in this album. They're all quite bittersweet in their language, and they both celebrate youth but then also look at it from the other perspective, which is like, it's fleeting. And so that specific blend of tragedy and beauty, specifically related to circumstances outside of your control and traumatic circumstances that Young Forever captures in the Bangtan universe story and in some of the songs, is perfectly reflected in The Stars and the Blackness Between Them. I rest my case. And when I think of this era, I just think of the Run music video and cardigans. Like, it was very 2015 fashion, and so as you can see, my accessory for this era is this cardigan, because I feel like the bright color of this also matches the Young Forever album cover. The next era, another iconic one, aren't they all iconic though, let's be real, is the Wings era, and I am including the Wings album in this, but I'm also including You Never Walk Alone. And we know this is the next stage of the Bangtan universe, and a lot of it is based on that one specific German book, and a lot of the core themes of this are obviously like duality and spirituality, taking inspiration from the book, but also the idea of like going from light to darkness, or the idea of evil to, no, the other way, good to evil. We wish other people would go the other way. And also the idea of like evil tempting you, right? And listen, everyone always talks about blood, sweat and tears, but we also are going to consider everything else here, right? We got to talk about Mama. Oh, when I heard that song for the first time and I learned about the meaning behind it and why J-Hope wrote it, tears, streaming, sobbing. I can't listen to that song now without crying. I've had to remove it from my playlist even though it's so good. And then Lie. Chef's kiss. Now, the bookish twin for this era focuses therefore more on Wings, because I feel like in this era Wings is bigger, You Never Walk Alone is smaller lengthwise too. However, I still feel like all of these themes from both of those albums and this era are encapsulated in Clytemnestra by Costanza Kazati. And as you might have guessed from the title, this is a Greek mythology retelling. So firstly, we've already got that element of like mythology woven into it. And it tells the story of Clytemnestra, who, if you don't know, was the bride of Agamemnon, and Agamemnon was one of the leaders of the Trojan War. And Clytemnestra is always best remembered in mythology as the wife who murdered her husband and murdered Agamemnon, because she did it really elaborately and had been planning it for the whole time he was away for the Trojan War, which I think was like a good few years. But outside of that, obviously, no one knew her, and in typical feminist fashion, no one knew the full story of her life or how she got to that point. But what this book does is it actually charts Clytemnestra's whole life, not just that one story, and so it's a feminist retelling of Clytemnestra, and it gives her a more 3D profile, and it walks you through her life from when she was a kid till that moment where she kills Agamemnon, and slightly afterwards as well. Like, it truly encompasses all of the elements of both Wings and You'll Never Walk Alone, because going back to Mama, hello, it talks about her being a mum and the complexities and the tragedies of that, and how a lot of the time she does have to give herself away to look after her children. But also, even with stuff like Spring Day from You'll Never Walk Alone, there's so many metaphors of nature that are used throughout this book, and also to describe Clytemnestra and her journey, where I was like, the parallels, and particularly as well because, as we know, Spring Day is also about death. A lot of the metaphor natures are used in that context as well. Plus, it's really interesting in the book, there is a clear point where Clytemnestra switches and changes, and again, does that not perfectly encapsulate the elements of duality and spirituality in Wings and the stories within the Bangtan universe and Boy Meets Evil? There we go, it's all coming together. I'm putting my literature degree to use. And because this era, I feel like, was defined by and all of the flowy fabrics, I am going to put on this sheer top to represent it. Or the truly iconic era is up next, which is the Love Yourself trilogy era. Yeah. Now, this has got to be my favorite era of all time. It's around the time I started getting into BTS properly. Like, I kind of listen to their songs in the background. I have very fond memories of it, and looking into this era more made me be like, I love this even more. Because if you include Map of the Soul Persona in this, which for the sake of the eras I'm actually not going to do, but we are for now, I find it so interesting that BTS used the 4-act structure that is used in a lot of East Asian countries to tell this story about self-love and continue the Bangtan universe on a little bit more. But again, BTS can never do just one thing, can they? I was trying to figure out what the bookish twin for this era should be, and I was like, oh my god, I have no idea. There's so much depth and complexity. I feel like even if you try to look at one album, the next album is slightly different. Even if you try and look at one song, the next song is different. There's not a lot of unity. But because there's not a lot of unity, that actually made me look at The Cassandra Complex by Holly Smale. Also, one of my favorite books of all time. So this book is set in London, and we follow Casey, who's never fit in, clearly has got a touch of the tism, but hasn't realized it yet. And she's just like, I don't really understand why I am the way I am. I'm normal, you're weird. And then one day she gets dumped, she gets fired, and her favorite cafe runs out of her favorite sweet treat, banana muffins, in one day, which I believe if you're autistic, it's a lot about like the routines and the rhythms of things. So that all throws her off massively, obviously. But she discovers that she has the power to go back and redo all of it and change time and start the one day again. And so basically she tries to keep like redoing this day and redoing it and redoing it and getting it right and getting it perfect, which, as we know, so much of Love Yourself and the whole era represents trying to not do things perfectly, trying to just be yourself, love yourself, you know, be in the moment. And I won't ruin it, but there is a lot of loving yourself and accepting yourself and like inner work that Cassandra does throughout this book. And because the book is all about her like going back to this one day, it also really interestingly plays with narratives in the same way that you have this like 4-act structure across all of the albums. And the accessory that I am going with for this era are these earrings, because they literally look like the outline of Love Yourself, right? I literally have no idea what I look like at this point. Let's move on. So as I said, era-wise, I have put Map of the Soul as its own era, which includes Map of the Soul Persona and Map of the Soul 7. But obviously, both those albums have very different vibes. So starting with Persona, right? Because it's short and sweet and all of those songs are just like fun and cute. You got Boy With Love, absolute banger, and Jamais Vu. The core of that album is just happiness and love, and I feel like aside from Dionysus, which even then you could argue is technically about love even if the song is quite intense because it's about like enjoying yourself, I picked If You'll Have Me by Uni as a bookish twin for this album. It is a graphic novel, so it's short and sweet, and it's an interracial sapphic romance set in college between a girl called Momo, who's like the introverted friend, very sweet, always ready to help people, and PJ, who is a slightly aloof butch girl. And the whole book basically is like their meet cute and how they meet and like romance and all that good stuff, but similar to Persona, because it is a continuation of the Bangtan universe, there's a little bit of mystery around PJ and who she is and her backstory that perfectly mirrors the slight hint of darkness amidst all this love and fluff that you get in Persona with songs, as we've said, like Boy With Love. Map of the Soul 7, right, obviously marks an extremely iconic era in BTS's history, with songs like Shadow, with songs like Ego, and songs like On. Almost all of that album is about self-exploration and self-discovery, and like bringing on the pain. That sounds nothing like On. But it's basically all about the narratives we tell ourselves, and also looking at the parts of yourself that you'd rather ignore and accepting them. Right, it's like the conclusion of Love Yourself. And so, because there's almost an element of like psychosexual stuff going on here, like Freudian stuff with all of the talk about ego and the self and shadow, and then also discussions around like time and the moon and friendship and many things. All of that is perfectly encapsulated and mirrored and twinned in The How by Ursa Daley Ward. And Ursa Daley Ward is a model and a poet, and it's very interesting because this book sits in a weird, almost like genre-defying space, which is why I feel like it perfectly matches Map of the Soul 7. Like, it's not quite a poetry book, and it's not quite a self-help book, and it's not quite a reflection on Ursa's life, but it's almost all of those things meshed together. Like, it's kind of taking you on a journey, and then you're like, oh, what's that over there? Like, looking at the table of contents, I was like, half of these could have been songs in Map of the Soul 7. The pandemic era. What a great time. I graduated during the pandemic, so... But this album, B, really brought me a lot of comfort, as I'm sure it did everyone else who listened to it. And so the bookish twin for this era is Happy Place by Emily Henry. And that's because the whole book is basically about 4 friends, or 5 friends even, being locked in one place together and trying to make the best out of a bad situation. And basically the whole plot of the book is a second chance romance between 2 characters, Harriet and Wynne, and basically all of their friends annually all go to a cottage together which they all call their happy place. But before the trip, Harriet and Wynne have broken up and they don't want to tell their friends or let them on, so they decide that they'll pretend to be together while everyone's on this trip. And I will always recommend Emily Henry as a romance author because she perfectly blends the nuance that you get from literary fiction and the feel-good vibes that you get from romance. And because it is such an interesting mix of like joy and sadness and it's bittersweet, it perfectly reflects B, because you can listen to the album and be like, oh, these are bangers, and then you listen to the lyrics and then you remember the context and you're like, I guess it's still a banger, but now I'm feeling all the feelings. And that's exactly what it's like to read an Emily Henry novel. Oh, I forgot the accessory. Right, so the accessory for the pandemic era that I'm putting on are fluffy socks. The ultimate item that represents wanting to stay inside and never leaving the house. You cannot walk outside with these. Now, the English trilogy era, which I am focusing in specifically on Dynamite, Permission to Dance, and butter. They had a purpose. They were just trying to be like fluff and lighthearted and good vibes, and there's literally nothing else there. And that's okay, because that's what we all needed at the time. But listening to Permission to Dance now, I can't listen to it anymore, guys. I remember it was everywhere on TikTok, and I had to mute my TikTok every time it came up. And so for that era, I am just recommending Let the Light In by Lemsisay, which is a short collection of poems that you can read in the morning. And each poem is literally like 3 or 4 lines long, but it is just so wholesome and such good vibes. And it's like injection of good vibes, which is pretty much what those songs were, let's be real. And for this era, I will be putting on these trousers, which is probably one of the brightest items of clothing I own, and perfectly match the 70s vibe of Dynamite, right? What a stylish outfit. I also realized I forgot my accessory for the Map of the Soul era. For Map of the Soul, I'm putting on 7 silver rings to represent OT7 and 7 years, and also I feel like it represents the soul as a ring. You get it. 1, 2, 3, 4. I just realized I don't have 7 fingers. Wait, no, I do. 5, 6, 7. This iconic outfit, we are ending on obviously the most iconic era, Arirang. And oof, this one was hard, guys. This one was really hard to find something that hit not only the Korean folktale-ness of this album, but the heaviness of this album, the humanity of this album, the wetness of this album, and also the defiance of this album as well, right? I think we can all agree that Arirang is basically, I just looked at myself, oh my god. I think we can all agree that Arirang is BTS going to the world and being like, we are who we are, you know? But I think I managed to find this era's bookish twin, which is The Girl Who Fell Beneath the Sea by Axie-O. Because firstly, it is a retelling of a classic Korean folktale, and secondly, as you can tell from the title, it's related to the sea. The core of the book follows Mina, whose hometown has been continuously flooded for years, and the people now believe that in order to stop the flooding, they need to appease the sea gods by sacrificing a girl to the sea every year. And in trying to save her brother's lover and the most beautiful girl of the village from the sea, Mina ends up in the sea and gets swept away to the spirit realm. And obviously while she's there, she's gonna be like, listen, I gotta speak to the sea god so that he can stop effing up my town. But of course there's a time limit because humans are animals, not gods, and she can only be in the spirit world for so long. And it's so interesting because so much of this book is about like resistance to rule as well, and obviously we know Arirang is related to colonial rule, and if you don't know, what I learned recently is that it was sung as a song in times of colonial rule, but that interestingly on the surface of the song it's about like a lover and anger and being like, listen, you've run away, lover, you're not gonna get very far, get back here. Which again perfectly ties into like the journey that Mina takes in this book, and the sort of mystical spiritual nature of it I feel like you perfectly get in songs like Into the Sun. I don't know about you, listening to that song is like a spiritual experience. I feel like, you know, like that SpongeBob meme when my body is being lifted from my soul, and you get the contrast between like the almost godlike nature of BTS as we've seen in many songs from this album, but then the fact that like because Mina has done something bad she could be considered a hooligan. Like guys, when I thought of this comparison I was so proud of myself. You just have to read this book, that's it. And the item of clothing I will be putting on for Arirang are my favorite heavy pair of black boots, because I feel like that's the style of the album currently, and you know, you could really, it's really hard to hold with one hand, you could really whack someone in the face with these things, and I feel like that's what Arirang is all about. I just remembered that I'm wearing fluffy socks. I don't know if I'm going to be able to wear these. Okay, I've somehow managed to put them on. Thank you so much for making it to the end of this video. Let me know your thoughts on any of these eras, any of the albums, any of the bookish twins in the comments as always. And if you like this, I think you'll like any of my other much more normal book recommendation videos here, or you might like the recent video essay I did about fangirl culture and idol culture that also spoke about BTS here. And if you've gotten to this point and you haven't subscribed yet, what are you doing? You really need to. My next 2 videos are going to be about fangirl culture, and also I have another bigger video coming out about BTS, so if you've liked this, stick around, there's more coming. And as always, I hope you're having a lovely day, living your best nerdy and authentic life, and I will see you over there or next week in the next video. Bye. In case you wanted a full tour of the horrendousness of this outfit, the earrings is not bad, but then it's this.